Imagine dying. Not once. Not in some heroic last stand. Just dying, ugly and afraid. Alone in an alley with no one to even notice. And then you open your eyes, and you're back at the exact moment your nightmare began. With every memory of your death fully intact, and absolutely no one who will ever believe you. That's not a superpower. That's a curse wearing a superpower's face. And it's the engine that drives one of the most punishing, most beloved Isekai stories ever made. ReZero, starting life in another world. Today we're doing a full retrospective. We're covering the series as a whole. We're breaking down exactly how Subaru's ability actually works. And we're getting into why, right now, in the middle of 2026, this franchise is arguably the biggest it has ever been. So let's get into it. Let's start with the premise, because ReZero does something genuinely sneaky with it. On the surface, this looks like every other Isekai. Ordinary guy, Subaru Natsuki, gets pulled from modern Japan into a fantasy world. He should be excited. He should be the chosen one. Instead, within minutes of arriving, he gets robbed and then he dies. And that's the twist that changes everything, because ReZero isn't interested in the power fantasy. It's interested in what happens when you take that fantasy away from someone who was counting on it. Subaru's ability is called Return by Death. Whenever he dies, time rewinds to a specific earlier point, a checkpoint, and he wakes up there with all of his memories from the loop he just lived through still fully intact. Everyone else resets completely. They have no idea any of it happened. To them, it's the first time. To Subaru, it might be the 40th. Here's the part that makes it so much crueler than a simple time loop gimmick. Subaru is bound by a curse laid on him by the entity that granted him this power in the first place, a being the fandom simply calls the Witch of Envy. If he tries to tell anyone what Return by Death actually is, the curse activates and kills him on the spot. So he can't warn people. He can't explain why he suddenly knows something he shouldn't. He has to carry every single death, every failure, every horrific thing he's witnessed completely alone, while also trying to convince people who barely know him to trust his red on a situation he can't justify. And the checkpoints aren't fixed either. They can shift forward as he makes progress, which sounds like a mercy, except it means the stakes only ever escalate. Loop after loop, he has to identify the actual cause of his death, because dying from the wrong wound doesn't fix anything. It just resets him with slightly less information than he'd like. And a body that remembers every single blade, every poison, every choke, right down to the sensation of it. The show does not soften this. Early on, Subaru dies over and over just trying to survive a single night, and each death is filmed like a horror sequence, not an action beat. There's also a structural cruelty to how the checkpoints work that a lot of casual viewers miss. A checkpoint isn't something Subaru chooses. It's assigned the moment he crosses into a new save point, usually without him realizing it happened until it's too late to go back further. That means if he makes a catastrophic mistake early in a loop, he can permanently lose the ability to undo it. The white whale hunt in Season 1 is a perfect example. An entire arc built around Subaru trying to broker an alliance between two feuding knights, where every failed attempt burns through information he desperately needs and narrows his options with every single death. By the time he actually succeeds, it doesn't feel like a victory lap. It feels like he barely survived his own strategy. What elevates this beyond shock value is what it does to Subaru psychologically. He starts the series as someone who genuinely believes his personality, his stubbornness, his sarcasm, his refusal to give up, is a strength that will carry him through anything. Return by Death systematically dismantles that belief. There's a stretch in the first arc, the Royal Selection arc, where Subaru tries to solve a problem through sheer force of will and gets crushed by it, loop after loop, until he has a complete breakdown in front of the witch cat, Puck, admitting that he has nothing, no skills, no magic, nothing to offer the people he's trying to save except a willingness to keep dying for them. That moment matters because it sets the template for the entire series. Subaru's real arc isn't about getting stronger in a conventional sense. It's about learning that the loops only work if he changes, if he actually listens, actually grows, actually becomes someone worth the trust he's asking for. Compare the Subaru who begs and bluffs his way through the first arc to the Subaru commanding the white whale hunt a season later, or the one making impossible calls during the Sanctuary arc when Amelia's trial threatens to break both of them. He's still funny, he's still a little insufferable, but the growth is real, and it's earned specifically through failure, which is rare for this genre. The rest of the cast carries that same weight. Amelia isn't a passive love interest. She's fighting her own losing battle against a world that hates her for looking like the Witch of Envy, and half-elf prejudice follows her everywhere. Rem's arc, especially after her memory is stolen and she falls into a sleep no one can wake her from, becomes one of the most devastating threads in the whole story, specifically because of how Return by Death interacts with it. Subaru is the only one who remembers who she used to be. Roswell, Beatrice, Wilhelm, Rom, Garfield, every major character in this world is hiding grief. And Subaru's ability keeps forcing him into rooms where he's the only one carrying the full picture. There's also Roswell, who spends most of the early seasons acting as this unreadable, faintly sinister presence pulling strings from the shadows. And part of what makes ReZero so rewatchable is realizing how much of his behavior only makes sense once you understand what he actually knows about the witch cult and about Subaru's ability. Very little in this show is filler. Almost every strange decision a side character makes ends up paying off 2 or 3 arcs later. The world building backs all of this up. The witch cult, the 7 deadly sin archbishops, each warped in horrifying and specific ways. The royal selection for the next ruler of Lugnica. The true identity of the Witch of Envy herself. It's a slow burn, but almost nothing is wasted. Season 2 digs into Subaru's backstory and forces a direct confrontation with self-loathing that recontextualizes his entire character. Season 3, the Priestella arc, throws him against Sin Archbishops directly and raises the cost of failure to a franchise high, ending with permanent losses that don't get undone. Which brings us to right now, because ReZero has never been bigger than it is this year. Season 4 premiered in April 2026, and it's split into 2 parts. The first 11 episodes, the Loss arc, ran through the spring, and the back 8 episodes, the Recapture Arc, just started airing this month in August 2026. So if you're catching this video now, new episodes are actively dropping. This season adapts what a lot of light novel readers consider the peak of the entire series. The Pleiades Watchtower arc, a stretch defined less by big flashy battles and more by mystery, psychological horror, and a direct challenge to rules the audience thought were locked in stone. Without spoiling specifics, The hype here isn't just nostalgia talking. Fans who've read ahead are warning that Return by Death itself stops behaving the way you expect it to in this arc, which for a series built entirely around the reliability of that one mechanic is a massive swing. The very name of the second half, the Recapture Arc, is already telling you something got taken that Subaru now has to fight to get back, and knowing this show, it's probably not going to be simple. There's also a new face driving a lot of the preseason buzz, a mysterious character named Shaula, tied directly to the Watchtower itself, whose motives fans have been theorizing about since the very first key visual dropped. White Fox is back behind the animation, the returning cast and staff are back, and the production is clearly being given the time it needs, which is exactly why the season got split into two cores instead of being rushed into one. Add in the fact that the premiere landed almost exactly on the 10th anniversary of the original anime, and in preseason anticipation, polling this topped every other spring release by a massive margin, ahead of shows fans genuinely expected to dominate the conversation. It's easy to see why this became the season's biggest story before a single episode even aired. It's also worth saying why this matters for the Isekai genre as a whole. A huge chunk of Isekai exists to flatter the viewer. New world, new powers, everyone loves you immediately. ReZero looked at that formula and asked what it would actually do to a person to be dropped into danger with no plan, no training, and only the ability to relive their own worst moments as a coping mechanism. That reframing is a big part of why the series is still talked about a decade after it started, and why a genre that's produced hundreds of forgettable clones still points back to this one as the example worth studying. So where does that leave ReZero as a whole? It's a series that took the most exhausted premise in modern anime and used it to build one of the more genuinely unsettling character studies out there. A story about a man whose only power is the ability to suffer repeatedly until he becomes someone worth saving people. It's not always comfortable to watch. It is very rarely predictable. And with the current season actively raising the stakes on its own central rule right now, this might be the single best moment to jump in, whether you're catching up from episode 1 or you're already counting down the days until the next episode drops. That's the retrospective. If you're new to ReZero, start from season 1. Don't skip ahead. The payoff genuinely depends on the journey. And if you're already caught up, let me know in the comments where you think this season is headed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.